Hello and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Painting with Paul, brought to you by Mills Community Media, Plaid Craft Company, and TJ's Cafe and Games in Milford, Massachusetts. Today we're going to be painting up a Reaper Bones Bodyguard Frost Giant. I have three varying stages here. Not a lot of difference between the first two, but we'll figure it out. First thing I did with all the models was I went over them and painted them with multi-surface black paint, full coat multi-surface black paint. Then I glued them all together to save time. If you're doing it at home, you might be better off to paint the pieces individually and then glue them together and then touch up any little spots, but it is what it is. So for the frost giants, have blue skin, so I used full coat, excuse me, peacock blue. It's a nice dark blue. And you can see I did it here around the giant. Then the next step I did was to use full cut barnwood, which is a light gray. I did that on my other two models here that I'll just set off to the side for now while I work on this one. I'll show you how I did it. I'm using this awesome painting mat that I got from TJ's Cafe and Games. It's actually a Magic the Gathering card mat, but it works amazingly well for keeping paint off your tables, and your mother and your wife will really appreciate you using one. So I'm using a little bit of this, wiping it off on my mat, and I'm going to lightly dry brush it on the skin so I can still see the blue through the skin. I'm giving it sort of a frosted effect, or like a freezer burn effect. I can't think of the right word, but I know what I mean in my head. Really good that does you. Sorry, I'm trying to keep that spaced out so you can see what I'm doing. Normally I might go over this with another lighter gray and then maybe a white too, but I'm trying to save some time and just do this quick for tabletop play, not really for display. So we're just going to do quick light strokes over all the blue. The skin's kind of tight on some of these parts, and these ones you don't actually, they just come pre-assembled that way. But fortunately, you can just go over it with black again if you accidentally get somewhere you don't want it to be, and touch it up later. So there's my frost giant skin all done. Next step I'm going to do is going to be to take some full cart painted finishes. This is a textured paint to create the gravel effect on the bottom of the miniature. I should have actually used the concrete color for this. There's a light concrete and a dark concrete, but I didn't think to grab that before I came in today, so I'm just going to use this light rust color. I'm going to apply it pretty heavily on the base because I want to add the texture, and I'm going to go over this later and paint it white, so then it will either look like snow or it'll look like gravel covered with snow. And the good thing about painted textures is it dries fairly quickly. It's really good for non-porous surfaces. And again, if I get a little bit on the boots, it doesn't matter because I'm going to go over those and paint them again later. I'm going to go all the way around the edge because why not? So it's drying fairly quickly, so I'm going to apply it a little heavier again in a few spots. I'm just going to dab it on to add a little more texture to it so it creates more of a gravelly effect. Let me give that a little bit to dry I'll rinse my brush off. I'm going to switch to do the armor real quick and show you what I was doing on the armor. So I discovered a while ago if I use metallic champagne or metallic pearl white as a base, and then I go over it with Dragonfly Glaze, it creates an almost ice effect. So I'm going to try to do that with this to create a magic ice armor effect. So I'm going to go over with parts of this, the champagne color, and parts of it with the pearl white. Again, I'm using dry brush technique, so I wipe my brushes off a little bit. I'm not applying the paint on too heavily because I want the shading to show through. Again, this is just for quick tabletop play. Most people that are going to do it for a display would be using wet brush technique, or they would apply it a little heavier still and go over it with a wash and maybe a liner, but I'm not doing that today. Went all the way around his armor, and it goes up under his fur here too. And I had a cool little 3D printed palette thing I was going to use today, made up by my friend Greg Kilo, and I forgot to bring it. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here with the armor. I'm going to hold it up in a second because I'm just kind of showing you what I'm going to do. And I kind of already got one with this stage ready to go. I'm just going lightly around the giant with the champagne colored metallic champagne. I'm going to get this here. There's a little bit of armor that hangs down. Yeah, I'm using a number 4 flat brush. It's 4. No, I'm sorry, it's a number 2 flat brush. So I'm gonna hit this with champagne and this with champagne, and then this other, I'm gonna make this a metallic skirt going around. I'm gonna make that, touch that up with the pearl white metallic, so it's a little bit different looking. Here, and that's what I did on my other model that we're going to move to in a moment. So just to give a little bit of contrast and difference, like I said, we're going to go over with this, with the pearl white. A few spots. If we go on too heavy, I can always pat my cloth on there, or get my brush wet, dry it off again, dry brush style. So anyway, I would go with the rest of the armor around to do that, but that's all I need to do for this. I'll show you in the next example in just a moment. After the champagne color here dried, I went over it and I put a little bit of this antique gold, just something to give it a little bit of a different look than what was there, so it's not all the same kind of plane. So we're drying that off again, dry brush style, and lightly applying that to the plates on the belt. Not too light that you can't see the difference. So I'm going to do that all the way around, and then I'll touch up some of these other little gold, these are the little parts that are hanging here, parts of the armor. So that's that. I'm going to move on to my next model, and we're going to finish this guy up. Still a little bit of work to do on him, but you can see the blue skin with the gray up in his eyes, his hands, arms, legs. Then I went over with the armor, a couple of coats of the champagne. It looks kind of silver on here, but compared to the pearl white, it doesn't look as silvery. It looks a little darker than I did the antique gold. On the plates here and here, I'm going to go around and touch up a couple of these smaller circles going around the armor. Then I'm going to go and use the antique copper up here on the axe. I'm going to paint the axe handle brown. Once this dries, I'm going to go over and use the black color shift to give it a magic effect. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the armor here with the glitter to give it an ice effect. So let's go ahead with that. I'm going to switch to my brushes though. Something a little bit smaller. I'm going to use a 10-0 spotter, it's called. Unfortunately, this one's a little frayed on the end, but I'm going to make it work. And again, this should be dry brush style, but I'm kind of just going quick, so it's going on a little heavier, but it's also giving it more of a contrast look, which is kind of what we want and is the whole point anyway. Seems like it's got, his armor has gold rivets going all the way around. Now you're thinking, just a common giant with gold armor? Well, it's magic armor, so there. It's my giant, I'll do what I want to. Feel free to post any questions you have on the Mills Community Media right under the video here. I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have about miniature painting or about any of the products I use, the companies I affiliate myself with. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Reaper miniatures, big fan of Impact miniatures, and I use a lot of WizKids miniatures as well. So if you can see, I went all the way around and did all the little studs as gold to make them stand out a little more. I'm going to go back and touch up a little more on some of the armor, and then I'll move on to the axe head. I think I'm good on the armor. I'll give that a second to dry. Put this away. Clean my brush. Using Brush Plus right here. It's a conditioner for your brushes. It cleans it and puts it back to a point. Just let it sit for a few minutes, then rinse it off in water and let it dry. Alright, so I'm going to use my number, I'm going to use this one here. This is number 4 flat, I believe. I'm going to use Treasure Gold Antique Copper. If you've ever seen the Treasure Gold line of paints, they are absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you can tell that, but I want to see there's 12 or 13 colors, and they're just phenomenal. Really high quality, great metallic paints. So I'm going over the axe head with this copper. I'm sure you're like, oh, copper, wouldn't that be patina in a heavy water atmosphere? Yeah, probably. But again, we're going to say it's a magic axe, so love that color. I might not even need to put the black gold color shift on there. Maybe in a few spots on the ornate part, just to touch it up. So while that axe head is drying, I'm going to rinse my brush off. Actually, I'm going to clean this one too. I'm going to use number 4 flat brush again with this Dragonfly Glaze. This is the blue-green gold shift. And like I said, I discovered completely by accident that, at least I felt, putting this over top of champagne gave it a icy effect. So that's what I'm going to do now over his armor, where I did the champagne and the pearl. It looks like a white glitter glue, but once it dries, it's just the glitter, and it's a really cool effect. Again, I'm going to dry brush that on to try not to put it on too heavy in any one particular spot. If you put it on heavy, it doesn't look so much like ice, but if you do it light, quick, I think it looks kind of like ice. A nice effect. Certainly it looks like it has some sort of special properties going on, so that's cool. I'm going to go over that. I'm actually just going to go over all the armor with this. Even though I already did some different color changes and accents, I'm just going to do it. Again, I'm just dry brushing it on. I'm not going crazy heavy with it. A bit goes a long way. That's why I just do it right out of the cap usually when I use my paint. I don't know how well the glitter's showing up on the camera. I'm sure you'll be able to see it more towards the end when it's completely finished and they're able to zoom in on it, but I kind of like the way it looks. Alright, I'm going to give that a moment to dry. Rinse off my brush, rinse off my other two brushes that have been soaking in conditioner, and go from there. Do some browns next. You want to make sure I clean this really well, so I'm going to need to reuse it. I don't want to get glitter on other parts that I don't want glitter on, obviously. Yes, I'm using a water bottle as a rinse cup. I want to be careful doing that. I know a lot of painters accidentally drink out of their rinse cups or bottles because they're not paying attention. In fact, I usually use a laundry detergent cap from an old bottle, because who's going to drink out of that, right? Okay, so while this, I'm actually going to do the base next. You can see the textured paint is dried down here. It's firm to the touch. I'm going to go over it quick with this white to make snow. I mean, I might leave some of the brown through. Well, it's more of a red, but I'm using Folk Art Ivory White. With the color texture, the painted texture paints, there's actually 2 shades of rust, 2 shades of moss, and 2 shades of concrete. And they may have more colors by now, I'm not sure, but they're great for creating different kinds of effects on ground. So if I wanted to go over it, make some ground a dark brown, I could, and then go over it with this to light up certain spots. And then I could use some of the mosses to create like a moss effect. I really enjoy these paints. And there, I feel like I'm getting kind of a frozen ground look, which is what I was going for. I don't even need to make it completely white, because I feel like the brown showing through gives it a better look. That's me personally, though. I was originally going to do the horns white as well, and then go over it with one of these more yellowy tan colors to make them look a little worn and faded, but I'm going to just go over them with the black color shift. Should give them a dark black look since it's being painted over black. The thing about color shift paint, when you go over it, how it shows up depends what kind of paint you're putting it over. And if you're a D&D player, I'm sure you're looking at the base being like, that is not the right size base for that figure. It is not the right size base for this figure. That is true. But it's what I had on hand, and it worked since 1 foot was off the ground anyway, and I didn't feel like building terrain around him to be standing off of or stepping off of. So it worked for me. And again, I don't play D&D, at least yet. Might give it a shot someday. In the interest of saving time, I'm going to do his padding to his arm guards the same black color shift as the horns. I realize it might not make sense, but it's just gives it some color and it's easy. Doing quick and easy tonight. Again, this is a model you would probably definitely want to paint parts of it, at least the arms, separate from the model before you put it together. Did I miss anything? No, let that sit for a minute. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do the axe. A little bit of the glyph work here on the axe. I use the same. It's only a subtle difference, but I can see it, and I suppose it depends on the light it's in as well. Next, I'm going to use some brown. Some shade of brown. I'm not actually sure what shade that is. Pure. Again, I'm using the same small flat brush, number 4 flats. I like using number 4s and number 2 flat brushes. Probably my favorite 2 brushes to use. So with this, I'm going to go over and touch up the little knapsack thing on his back. I went on a little heavier than I intended, but oh well. I'm going to also do the treasure chest right next to it. And to make them look different, we're going to use these 2 shades, the English mustard and the yellow ochre, to enhance them and give them a little bit different shading. And normally I would do this with several different browns, different parts of the body, so there's little differences, but in the interest of saving time and making things less confusing, I'm doing the handle of the axe, the treasure chest, the knapsack, and his boots all the same shade of base brown. And we'll just make little changes afterward. And the same thing with the fur on the boots and the fur on his pelt on his shoulders. Like I said, if I was going to be doing this for a commission for someone, I would be using several different shades of brown or tans for this to make it all stand out a little better. I actually really like the shade of brown as a base color. I've never used this color before. I like the look it's given me. Oops, butterfingers. Good thing it's a Ripper Bones model and not a Bones Black or a metal model or a resin model. I might have just broken it. I'm not really a fan of Reaper Bones Black, which is different than Reaper Bones because it's a harder plastic. It's got more detail, but if you drop it, it breaks. Like if I dropped this on the floor even, it would probably just bounce. All right, do the beard next. I'm gonna use the same gray that I used earlier for the skin, but since it's not gonna be on blue, it'll be a completely different look and effect. Again, dry brush technique. For the record, I don't always do dry brush. I used to. It's good for quick paints, but when I have more time to sit and do a model, I prefer doing the wet brush, and I'll do a little bit of dry brush over top of it, but mainly wet brush. And then I've been practicing with washes a bit, and I like how they come out. So, but for quick paint jobs, dry brush is great because I just did that. I got to touch up his hair around his helmet a little bit because he's just going to be white and gray all the way around. I believe that's how frost giants are. Didn't have time to look that up beforehand. There's enough varying in the pressure on the dry brush too that I think the beard looks fine. There's different layers of shade in there. I'm going to clean this brush real quick, and then I am going to work on the boots, handle, treasure chest, and then the fur. And then we'll wrap this bad boy up and call it a night. Let's use this one. English mustard, folk art English mustard. Feels kind of thick. Oh yeah. Be very careful to not freeze your pants. I'm suspecting that maybe I let this freeze up or something. Still works good for dry brush. I just gotta mix it up a little bit. Don't tell Plaid I did this. There we go. I'm going to do this English mustard a little bit on the ropes of the treasure chest. And it is a great color for rope. I'm going to go over the knapsack rope with the same. I'm just going to use a little bit. I'm going to use a smaller brush. But I'm going to go over the rope on the knapsack with the same paint color. I'm going to do a little bit on the corners with this too, a little watered down. So it looks to be faded a little bit and worn. Sounds good. Now I'm going to use the yellow ochre on the handle a little bit, the wood handle, and on the wooden treasure chest. It's kind of a goldenrod-y color, very similar to goldenrod, which I'm actually a fan of, so probably why I like it so much. Actually, I'm just gonna do a little bit on the chest, and then I'm gonna use it on the strapping on the axe handle. Probably not my best color choice for the wood on the treasure chest, but again, I was trying to keep my paint choices down a little bit. So not confusing anyone with overkill. Because it's common for me to do a model this size with 20 or 30 different kinds of paint. It just depends on what I feel like doing at the time. Alright, I still have to go over the fur around his upper torso, which I kind of forgot somehow. So I'm going to rinse this brush and get that brown out again. Do that, and then we'll do blue, and then we're almost done. And I'm going to let the black show through a little bit more on this because I considered leaving the fur black, actually. I kind of liked it, but I just felt like that just seemed lazy. So we're going to paint it. Yes, I realize dry brush is not super detailed. I'm going to say again, this is just for tabletop play. I mean, normally I wouldn't be going quite this fast on a model. I tend to do them quicker when I do conventions and videos. Yeah, almost done. I'm just going to look at him real quick and see if I need to touch anything up. I didn't do anything with his eyes. I just leave him black. No, I'm not going to leave him black. Alright, so we missed a ring on one of his fingers and his eyes. So the ring. Let's make the ring color shift. Blue Flash is actually one of my favorite color shift colors. I almost consider doing the armor this color. I'm just going to do this one little ring. Blue Flash. And I like it. I think I'll use the ochre for his eyes and then call it a night. And after this is completely dried, I would go over it. I lightly brush it with Mod Podge Ultra matte. Unless there was any parts that I wanted to look like they were frozen, I might use the gloss. But generally I use Mod Podge Ultra matte to seal my miniatures after I paint them. But we won't do that on video. You know what? This brush is just a little too beat up for his eyes, so I'm going to let it be for now, and I'll finish his eyes another time. But for the most part, he's done. So I'm going to move him right up here for the cameraman to take a look at. And thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Claritin.